Hello students, good morning to you all. Good morning, I hope all are doing good. Good morning students. Good morning Rekha. Joshnavi, good morning. Avanti, good morning. Harshini, good morning. Koteshwar Rao, good morning. Vanilla, good morning. Bhavishya, good morning. Shall we start the class? Gayatri, good morning. Good morning once again. Good morning each and everyone. In last class, I have explained about the degrees of carbon and hydrogen. Along with that, I have given a brief introduction about the organic chemistry, and I was explained vital force theory. Afterwards, I started explaining degrees of various elements. In that process, I have completed explanation about degree of carbon and hydrogen also. Today we will be continuing study about degrees of other elements which are present in the organic compounds. Okay? Fine. If any student has missed the last class, in last class I explained about degree of carbon and hydrogen. We have in total 4 degrees of carbon: primary carbon, secondary carbon, tertiary and quaternary. Primary carbon is the one who is directly attached to only a single carbon. Secondary carbon is the one who is in direct contact with 2 other carbons. In the same manner, tertiary carbon means the one who is directly in contact with 3 carbons. And quaternary carbon is the one who is in direct contact with 4 other carbons. And after completing degrees of carbon, I explained about degree of hydrogen. So, degree of hydrogen is referred from degree of carbon itself. That is, if degree of hydrogen, if I am talking about degree of hydrogen, primary hydrogen means the hydrogens which are in contact with primary carbon. It means those hydrogens which are attached to primary carbon are called as primary hydrogens. Secondary hydrogens means those hydrogens which are attached to secondary carbon. And tertiary hydrogens means those hydrogens which are attached to tertiary carbon. And I concluded that there is no such kind of quaternary hydrogen or 4 degree hydrogen. Okay, now we will be continuing about degrees of the remaining elements, right? Next one, the third one is degree of halogen. As I told, halogen atoms can be represented with this symbol where X stands for fluorine or chlorine or bromine or iodine. Collectively, the halogen atoms are represented with X, where X stands for halogen atom. If I am talking about degree of halogen, it is explaining about the classification of alkyl halides. It is most important topic under haloalkanes and haloarenes chapter from 12th standard. There we will study about the classification of alkyl halides, right? Classification of alkyl halides or haloalkanes. In detail explanation about haloalkanes we'll study under the course of 12th standard. Now we are trying to discuss about the classification of alkyl halides. Okay. Now under the degree of halogen, whenever I am referring degree of halogen, it refers the classification of alkyl halides. Fine. With that intention, we are trying to classify the alkyl halides, or we are trying to explain the degree of halogen. Fine. It is primary, secondary, and again tertiary. We will try to discuss whether the existence of quaternary alkyl halide story is there or not. First, let me define what is primary alkyl halide or 1 degree alkyl halide. Okay. Primary alkyl halide is the one in which the halogen atom is connected with 1 degree carbon. In the same way, secondary alkyl halide is the one in which halogen atom is connected to secondary carbon. In the same way, the tertiary alkyl halide is the one in which halogen atom is connected to or attached to tertiary carbon. Students, do we have any kind of quaternary alkyl halide? Can anyone tell me? Okay. Yeah, someone is typing like last chemistry class, guys. Okay. Students, please note down the points properly, and at the end of the class, I wanted to address few things. Okay. Right. So let me finish the degree of halogen, afterwards oxygen and then nitrogen. We'll try to quickly complete. Then I'll try to address few things. Okay. Good. Now tell me, do we have any kind of quaternary or 4 degree alkyl halide? Response please. Can you have any kind of quaternary alkyl halide? If at all quaternary alkyl halide exists or 4 degree alkyl halide exists, in which, if at all it exists, in such compounds, halogen must be connected to 4 degree carbon. Is it possible? What do you mean by 4 degree carbon? 4 degree carbon is the one in which the reference carbon must be in contact with 4 carbons. So carbon valency was already satisfied. So therefore, you will not have any kind of quaternary alkyl halides, right? Therefore, there is no such kind of quaternary alkyl halide. It is not possible. So let's try to work on the examples. Let's try to work on the examples. Okay. Now, my dear students, try to classify the following compounds. Classify the following compounds into primary or secondary or tertiary alkyl halides. Are you ready? Are you ready to classify the given compounds into primary, secondary and tertiary? Now I am presenting the examples. Try to classify these compounds into primary, secondary and tertiary. CH3, CH2, Cl. Just I am giving very simple examples. CH, CH3, Br and CH3C, CH3, CH3. Over here, let me write iodine because chlorine, bromine and iodine represents the halogen atoms. Students, try to classify these compounds into primary, secondary and tertiary. Responses please. Okay, this is not kind of chocolate question, this is very simple question. Okay, try to classify these compounds into primary, secondary and tertiary. Students, I hope you are giving responses. Responses please, responses please. Are you working on these examples? Yes, very good. Some students are giving proper answers. Right, right. Good. Now, let's try to work on the carbon to which the halogen attached. Since this carbon is primary carbon and corresponding alkyl halide is primary alkyl halide. Since this carbon is secondary carbon, the corresponding alkyl halide is secondary alkyl halide. Now, in the third example, this carbon is a tertiary carbon, hence the corresponding alkyl halide is tertiary alkyl halide. I hope you are able to classify the compounds into primary, secondary and tertiary. Now, I am trying to give next question, another question. Try to work on this question also. Question number 2. Okay. As I told, we can represent the hydrocarbons with bond line representation. In that process, I am trying to give few examples. Try to work on these examples and classify these compounds into primary, secondary and tertiary. For your easy understanding, I am trying to label the location of carbon. Here this color dot is representing the position of carbon. Now you can classify the alkyl halides properly and easily. Are you working on these examples? Now, dear students, try to classify these compounds into primary, secondary and tertiary alkyl halides. Okay. Now, example number 3. It is even this simple example. Again, I am trying to give another example. Okay. So students, try to classify even these compounds into primary, secondary and tertiary. I have given third question also. Work on these examples for classification of alkyl halides. Okay, I hope you are working on the classification. Okay, as I told, classification of alkyl halides is very simple. So primary alkyl halide is the one in which the halogen atom must be connected to primary carbon. In case of secondary alkyl halides, halogen must be attached to secondary carbon. For tertiary alkyl halide, halogen must be attached to tertiary carbon. If you are good enough in identifying primary, secondary, tertiary carbons, then classification of alkyl halides is not a big task. Okay, fine. Right. Now work on this one. Here I have given the compounds with bond line representation. Bond line representation. Bond line representation. Now in this process, as I told, here the bonds between carbon and carbon are represented with lines. Now if you talk about this alkyl halide, students please tell me, Here this carbon is directly in contact with how many other carbons? This carbon is connected indirectly with how many carbons? 2 carbons. Hence this carbon is secondary carbon. Therefore the alkyl halide is secondary alkyl halide. In this case, this carbon, reference carbon, is directly in contact with how many carbons? 3 carbons. Hence the corresponding alkyl halide is tertiary alkyl halide. Now, in this case, the reference carbon is here primary carbon. Why it is a primary carbon? Since the carbon which is attached to halogen is directly in contact with how many carbons? Only 1 carbon. Hence, this alkyl halide is primary alkyl halide. I hope you are able to classify properly. My dear students, IUPAC I have not explained. IUPAC will be discussed in future classes, possibly in offline classes, wherever you are attending offline classes. There systematically each and every chapter from NCERT will be explained. There would be a proper schedule. Based on the schedule, all the chapters will be explained. We didn't have time for working on IUPAC nomenclature of organic compounds. In future, you will be studying IUPAC nomenclatures. Okay. Now, work on this example. Now, here if you observe in the third question or third example, if you talk about this carbon is directly in contact with how many carbons? Only 2 carbons. Hence, this carbon is secondary carbon. Corresponding alkyl halide is secondary alkyl halide. And again, this carbon is directly in contact with 3 carbons. Hence, the corresponding alkyl halide is tertiary alkyl halide. Now, the reference carbon, the carbon to which the halogen is attached, is directly in contact with only 1 carbon. Hence, this carbon is a primary carbon. The corresponding alkyl halide is primary alkyl halide. I hope points are clear. You are able to classify the alkyl halides. Okay. So, therefore, we have completed discussion about degree of halogen. Okay. Under degree of halogen, we have discussed about classification of alkyl halides. We have in total primary, secondary and tertiary alkyl halides. I hope you are able to classify alkyl halides properly. Moving ahead. Okay. Now, we have next with the classification of alcohols. Now, I'll write this topic under degree of oxygen. Okay. Whenever we are talking about degree of oxygen, it is nothing but classification of alcohols. It is nothing but classification of alcohols. Okay. Whenever we are referring about degree of oxygen, it refers the classification of alcohols. Again, the same story. We have 3 categories of alcohols. When I am talking about alcohol or degree of oxygen, I am trying to refer it as alcohol. As we know, OH group, okay, is referred as alcoholic group. Okay, this is considered as alcoholic group or functional group. Alcoholic functional group. I think you know very well about the functional groups. My dear students, if you refer the degree of oxygen or classification of alcohols, we have 3 categories: primary alcohol and secondary alcohol and tertiary alcohol. And I think you can easily give this answer. We don't have such kind of quaternary. Alcohol is nothing. Okay. After giving the definition about primary, secondary and tertiary alcohols, you will come to know about the existence of quaternary alcohol. Now, what do you mean by primary alcohol? Primary alcohol is the one in which the OH group, alcoholic group, is attached to attached to what carbon? Primary carbon. In the same manner, secondary alcohol is the one in which OH group is attached to secondary carbon. In the same way, tertiary alcohol is the one in which the OH group is attached to 3-degree carbon. As we know, the quaternary alcohol or 4-degree alcohol do not exist. We don't find such kind of compound because carbon valency has to be violated, which is impossible, do not exist. Or not possible at all. Okay, so for your easy understanding, I'll try to write over here in this way. The OH must be connected to primary carbon. Okay, the OH group must be connected to which carbon? Primary carbon. It is the one, primary carbon is the one, if you consider this as a reference carbon, this reference carbon must be connected to only one carbon. In the same way, the reference carbon means the carbon which is in direct contact with OH must be with how many carbons directly? 2 carbons. In the same way, tertiary carbon is the one in which the carbon is in direct contact with 3 carbons. If you consider this as a reference, why I have taken this as reference? Because this carbon is directly attached to OH. Since this carbon is directly in contact with 3 carbons, this carbon should be tertiary carbon. This carbon here should be secondary carbon, and this carbon should be primary carbon. I hope this point is clear. Okay? Right? I hope you are following the points properly. This is very simple. So under classification of alcohols, I have given primary, secondary and tertiary. We are going to apply by giving with suitable examples. I hope you have noted the points or take this screenshot if possible. Now I will give practice questions on classification of alcohols. Okay. Now look at carefully. Let me start with very simple and basic example. CH3, CH2OH. Can anyone name this compound? It is very familiar compound. Okay, you have to classify the following into, same question, classify the following into primary, secondary or tertiary alcohols. Okay. Now another example, CH3, CH3OH. In a similar fashion, I am trying to give the same examples, but just for comparison perspective or just for practice perspective. Now students, please tell me now. So this alcohol is categorized under primary or secondary or tertiary. As we know, this carbon is a primary carbon, hence this alcohol is considered as primary alcohol. In the second example, the OH group is connected to secondary carbon and corresponding alcohol is considered as secondary alcohol. Now, yes, this is very good. This compound is ethanol. Some of you guys have given the answer. This can be called as isopropanol or isopropyl alcohol. All these names you will be studying in future classes. Now, the carbon which is in direct contact with OH is tertiary carbon. Hence, the corresponding alcohol is tertiary alcohol. Another example number 2. Okay, example number 2. Look at carefully. CH3 over here, OH and over here H. Try to classify these compounds. Try to classify these compounds into primary, secondary and tertiary. Primary, secondary and tertiary. Under second question, A and B and C. Okay? Okay? Now moving on to the another example. Dear students, try to classify even these alcohols into primary, secondary and tertiary. Okay? So try to classify these compounds into primary, secondary and tertiary alcohols. Try to classify these compounds into primary, secondary and tertiary alcohols. I hope you are working on classification, right? Now if you talk about this carbon, or if you look at this carbon, the one who is directly attached to OH is what carbon? Secondary or primary or secondary carbon or tertiary carbon? This is directly in contact with two carbons and hence it is a secondary carbon. The corresponding alcohol is a secondary alcohol. Now if you just observe this carbon who is directly in contact with OH, the reference carbon, what is the reference carbon? The carbon which is directly attached with OH is tertiary carbon. Hence the corresponding alcohol is tertiary alcohol. Now just try to focus on the carbon which is directly attached with OH. Since this carbon is a primary carbon, hence the corresponding alcohol is primary alcohol. Now the carbon who is in direct contact with OH is a secondary carbon, hence the corresponding alcohol is secondary alcohol. Right? Secondary alcohol. Okay? I hope you are able to classify the alcohols into primary, secondary and tertiary. Very simple, very simple. If you are able to identify the degree of carbon, then degree of halogen is very easy and degree of even oxygen is very simple. Okay? Now everything is depending on the degree of carbon. If you are comfortable in classifying degree of carbon, degree of hydrogen can be inferred from degree of carbon itself. If you are able to predict the degree of carbon, then we can classify halogen degree and oxygen degree very easily. Now moving ahead, the last one which is left with us is the degree of nitrogen. Now I am trying to classify the degree of nitrogen. This is very important and bit tricky and very simple. Degree of nitrogen. If I am talking about degree of nitrogen, it is the classification of amines. Classification of amines. In 12th standard, you will study a chapter named as amines or nitrogen containing compound. There we will study about the classification of amines. Okay? Classification of amines is important. Now, if you are talking about classification of amines, it is a bit tricky. It is slightly different from the classifications of alcohols and alkyl halides. If I am talking about amines, amines can be represented as primary amine, secondary amine, tertiary amine. I will come to that point. Okay. Now let me write over here nitrogen only. Nitrogen degree I am trying to present. Nitrogen can be classified into 4 degrees. Wow. Nitrogen has 4 degrees, carbon has 4 degrees. Okay. But hydrogen and halogen and oxygen have only 3 degrees. Who is having more number of degrees? It is carbon and nitrogen. Okay. So how many degrees are there for nitrogen? Again for nitrogen also we have 4 degrees. Now it is 1 degree nitrogen and 2 degree nitrogen. It means secondary amine and tertiary amine, and we have quaternary amine. Quaternary amine. Okay. Right. What is actually the 1-degree amine or primary amine? Let me write it as amine. Again over here, amine and amine. So listen this point properly, and it is very, very important. Okay. So 1-degree amine is the one in which nitrogen is directly attached with. Clearly listen this point. Carefully observe this point or listen this point. Nitrogen is directly attached to, I guess your answer is primary carbon. It is not the primary carbon. Directly attached to only one carbon. Only one carbon. Keep this point in red color. So what you are saying, sir? What you are saying? I was trying to say primary amine is the one in which nitrogen is directly attached to how many carbons? How many carbons? It is only one carbon. Only one carbon. It is not the primary carbon. Okay. Then moving ahead. Now secondary amine is the one in which nitrogen is directly attached to how many carbons? 2 carbons. It is not secondary carbon, but nitrogen must be attached to 2 carbons. In the same way, tertiary amine is the one in which nitrogen is directly attached to how many carbons? Directly 3 carbons. It is not with tertiary carbon. Okay. In the same way, quaternary or 4-degree amine is the one in which nitrogen is directly attached to 4 carbons. I hope this point is clear. Was it clear? Okay. I think this point is clear. Okay. Let me represent the identification of 1-degree, 2-degree, 3-degree and 4-degree amines in a easier way. So what is actually the primary amine? Primary amine is the one in which nitrogen must be directly attached to how many carbons? It is only one carbon. In the same way, secondary amine is the one in which the nitrogen is directly connected to how many carbons? 2 carbons. If nitrogen is in direct contact with 2 carbons, it would be the secondary amine. Now moving ahead, tertiary amine is the one in which the nitrogen is directly in contact with how many carbons? 3 carbons. In the same way, quaternary or 4-degree amine is the one in which nitrogen is directly in contact with how many carbons? 4 carbons. Whenever nitrogen is involved with 4 bonds, there is a day-2 bond as we know, and nitrogen will have a partial positive charge. It is clear indication of presence of 4-degree amine. Okay, I hope you are following. Things are very simple, very simple. Okay. Under classification of amines, I will try to give the examples, try to give the right answers for these questions. Shall we? I hope this point is clear. Shall we move on discussion about examples related to classification of amines? Shall we? Okay. Example number 1. I mean to say, question is classify the following into primary, secondary, tertiary, quaternary amines. Okay. Example number 1 or question number 1. CH3NH2, CH3, twice NH, CH3 taken 3 times N, and the fourth one is CH3, CH2 taken 4 times N. As I told you, if nitrogen is involved with 4 bonds, it should be referred with partial positive charge. Okay. Students, try to classify the compounds into primary, secondary, tertiary and quaternary amines. Okay, this is not a kind of chocolate question. If I can categorize, very small chocolate question. Okay, so very simple question, very simple question. Try to answer this classification. Yeah, try to. Okay, shall we? Okay, here nitrogen is directly attached to how many carbons? Nitrogen is directly in contact with how many carbons? Nitrogen is directly in contact with how many carbons? It is in direct contact with only one carbon. Hence, this amine is considered as primary amine. Now, here the nitrogen is directly in contact with how many carbons? Here, carbons number is 2. Therefore, it is the secondary amine. Here, nitrogen is directly in contact with how many carbons? This is going to be tertiary amine. And here, nitrogen is directly in contact with how many carbons? 4 carbons. Hence, this is quaternary amine. Quaternary amine. Next, second question. Okay. Right, students? In a overlook, you may commit mistakes. Okay. Try to properly classify these compounds. And D. Okay. It is actually very simple question. Very simple. Very simple. Yes, try to answer the classification of the given amines into primary, secondary, tertiary and quaternary. Okay. Quickly. Students are very busy in chatting with friends. Okay. Yeah, very few students are trying to give the answers. Quickly give the answers so that we will close this degree story. Okay. So here, how many carbons are in direct contact with nitrogen? How many carbons are in direct contact with nitrogen? It is only one carbon. Hence this amine is a primary amine. It is the primary amine. Students, I told some students are writing it as secondary. It is not the secondary amine. It is not the secondary amine. You have to count the number of carbons which are directly attached to nitrogen. You are not supposed to check the degree of carbon. You are not supposed to check the degree of carbon. You need to just count the number of carbons into which are number of carbons which are directly attached to nitrogen. Right? Okay. Now this is going to be a primary amine. Now again the same story. Nitrogen is directly connected to how many carbons? It is only one carbon. Again this amine is primary amine. Here nitrogen is directly attached to how many carbons? Only 2 carbons. Hence it is secondary amine. Here nitrogen is directly attached to how many carbons? 3 carbons. Hence this amine is tertiary amine. Nitrogen is directly connected to how many carbons? It is 4 carbons. Hence this amine is quaternary amine or 4-degree amine. Okay. Right. Students, with this I wanted to stop for today's session. Students, I hope I explained the degree of different atoms which are present in a given organic compound. As I was keep on saying that the people who are taking the bridge course are privileged. If you are trying to utilize the course properly, and you will get the, I mean, you will be able to properly revise the basic points, so that when you are coming here for offline classes, so you can cope up with the regular lessons properly. Okay, and the videos are there in the channel, and again if you can go through the videos, you will come to know the important basic concepts. Try to note down these points and properly revise these points, so that when you are trying to attend for offline classes, you can cope up with the classes very easily. Okay, and all the very best for your future, and work properly and study properly, so that you will be succeeded. Okay, with this I wanted to close for today's session. Thank you once again for each and everyone. Have a nice day and all the very best for your bright future. Thank you.
నేను చెప్పేసావా లాస్ట్ అని